Hello, can everyone hear me? Excellent, excellent. If you can't shout up. So a very warm welcome to sunny Newcastle to our inaugural conference on the evaluation of patient and public involvement in research. I'm Lynn Corner, I'm the Director of Voice and Engagement here in Newcastle, and on behalf of all the organising committee, it's my pleasure to welcome you today. Starting off with a little bit of housekeeping, the exits are marked in green. We chose this venue. No venue is ever perfect, but we particularly chose this venue because it's reasonably compact. So all the main plenaries will be in here. The loos and everything are downstairs. It's fully accessible. There is people on the desk at the back. If you have any questions at any time, all the team are here to help to make sure that everything is as positive experience as possible. So welcome. All the workshops are downstairs as well. So we're delighted to welcome you all here today, our speakers who have come from Canada, from Denmark, Ireland, Spain, just to name a few, and of course from across the UK. And whether you've travelled 5 miles, 500 or 5,000, we are just delighted to see you all here today. We hope that you'll stay till the end of the conference tomorrow. It's going to be late on a Friday, but I can heartily recommend the Geordie hospitality and get yourselves down the big market. We have some fantastic plenaries, but I realise it's late in the day, but I hope both as enjoying the conference, you'll all enjoy being in the fabulous city of Newcastle as well. A big thank you to Susan Chrysos and the organising team for organising this. It has been a real sort of challenge to organise in between day jobs, but they've done a fabulous job. And again, if you have any queries throughout, the team are on hand to ask any questions. We wanted this conference to be reasonably informal, actually. It's really came to us that there was a lot of debate around evaluation, lots and lots of different perspectives. And at a recent workshop that we had in Newcastle, I think the consensus there was to agree to disagree, because there are so many different perspectives on evaluation. But what we want to do in this conference is that we give us a chance to come together, to share international perspectives on evaluation, to really have a conversation about what's important, what we want to evaluate, why we want to evaluate, and really to have that in a really supportive environment with friends, colleagues, new and old. And hopefully from the discussions that we have around this, we'll be able to take forward our thoughts into perhaps new relationships, new working together. And hopefully from the big debate tomorrow, we might reach some new consensus. That's our hope for today. So hopefully we're going to sort of have a lot of discussion, a lot of chance to kind of share views and opinions. We also want you to debate it wider. We're live streaming the event through the Voice digital platform. The details are at the back if you haven't already picked them up. So do tweet, do look at the live stream, and also we will put up the presentations from the plenaries on the Voice digital platform so that you can access them for further reference and for colleagues at a later date. So we hope this is the start of an ongoing conversation. So our program over the next couple of days. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have a wonderful, stimulating conversation. But given that we're in the middle of Brexit and we have a lot of votes at the moment, we're going to start today with an obligatory vote. So over to Rachel.
Thanks very much. Okay, just change these slides. Okay, hello. So first off, for everybody with a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop or anything that can access the internet, if you'd like to take part in our online interactive vote, which we're going to be doing right here, right now, for the next 5 minutes, please could you open up a normal web browser and direct your web browser to the address on the slide there, ra.ombia, not amoeba, ombia.com. And I'll give you 30 seconds or so to do that.
Thank you. Turn it down.
Okay. Okay, fine. It should say polling is closed, that's fine. I haven't opened it yet. Okay, how are we getting on? Okay, are we managing to find it? If you can put in the session ID at the bottom, that's all one word, PPI conference. When you type it in, it looks a bit strange. It looks as if it puts in spaces, but that's fine. And just log in. Sorry, that wasn't me. I didn't talk. It wasn't me. Okay. Okay. So if we've all managed to do that. Now, if you look at your screens, it takes a couple of seconds to update. Hopefully, it should come up with these two questions. Are we looking, nodding, or yes? So I've got a series of questions for you. If you can...
Test one. Sorry about that. I don't know what, something's interfering.
Yeah. Hello? Yeah. Okay, mic number 3. Let's try this. Have we all got that on our screen? Has it worked? We're saying polling is closed, right? This worked perfectly when I tried it. Hang on a moment. Okay, it turns out you had to press start polling. My apologies. It's working. Excellent. I knew there was something I was forgetting. Okay, so that's all coming up. So if you could all, and you can see at the very top all of your responses here, the number of responses. So I'll just give that a little minute. We realise that some of you may fall into both categories, but I think you know what we're hoping to get at. Wow, 118. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So 98 people have identified that they're professional researchers/professionals, and 28 people identified that they're PPI. That doesn't necessarily mean that only 28 people in the room are PPI/lay people, but just that's how many people have responded. Okay, thank you. I promise it gets more interesting from here on out. Okay, this should update almost immediately on your screen. So we're really interested to know, in one word, what for you is the most important aspect of PPI in research? There we are. So hopefully you should just be able to write in one word and click submit or whatever it is. Oh, yeah, we're coming through, yeah. It's not easy to categorize it into one word, I know. And what we're going to do with this is you'll see live results as soon as you've voted, and I've closed off the voting, but we're also going to use this after the conference and analyse it. Okay. I think that's about it. Wow. Okay, there's a nice little word cloud, and the bigger words are what was most often mentioned by all of you. So we can see here that the most often mentioned word is collaboration, but what I really love about this is empowerment, engagement, relevance, relationships, impact, representation. Yeah. Fantastic. How interesting. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next one then. Okay. So we've got a few interesting questions to really just get the creative juices flowing, I suppose. So here's your question. There needs to be more quantitative, i.e. measurement-based evaluation of PPI impact. Do you agree? Oh, quick answers coming in here. And what's interesting is, because I asked you that question at the beginning about if you're a PPI or a professional researcher or whatever, we're going to be able to understand your answers down by those categories. Okay. What did you all say? Okay. This isn't particularly clear, but the blue represents agree. So only half of you agreed that we need to have more quantitative evaluation of PPI impact. B, 44%, these aren't percentages, 51 of you agreed, 44 disagreed, and 33 not sure. Okay, and who said this? Okay. Right, let's move on to the next one. Okay. Evaluation of PPI in research should be independent of PPI and the researchers involved. So think about a particular study and you want to evaluate PPI in that study. Should it be completely independent of everybody involved, including the PPI people involved? I like how this is creating some debate already. Okay, should we have a look and see what you all said? Okay, most people disagreed with that. Interesting, okay, good to know. And then what was a split? Okay, so very few PPI people agreed with that. Okay. Great. Another couple of questions then when we're done. Thank you very much. So, evaluation is needed to help us understand how to improve the quality of PPI. What do you think about that? Would you agree? Would you disagree? Or not sure? Again, some really quick answers coming in here. I'm going to leave that for this question and just have it as evaluation in general. I think that's something we can maybe explore in one of the upcoming talks. But thank you. Okay, let's see what you said about that. Wow. Okay, nearly everybody agreed with that. Interesting. Okay, fantastic. And unsurprisingly, okay, so that's quite interesting. Okay, I think this might be the last question. Evaluation is needed to help us understand how to improve research. Evaluation of PPI. Again, some quick answers. Let's see what you said, if you're all ready. Again, really, very much skewed towards agree. Okay, fantastic. Was that the last question that we had? Okay, no, this is the last one. Okay, final one. And this is quite an interesting one because I think it has a bit of a moral aspect of it as well. Evaluation of PPI in research is necessary to ensure accountability. What do you think? It's a tricky one, that one. The answers aren't coming in quite as quickly. Okay. What did we think? Okay. So, probably something like 2/3 of you agreed, but actually a significant proportion of you weren't sure about that one. And that's maybe something that we can pick up in the talks as we come up. And very quickly, what was the split? Again, quite a few of you weren't sure, and in particular, yeah, quite a few professionals weren't sure about that one. Okay, fantastic. Thank you ever so much for participating in our little online voting. Wasn't sure how it would go, but it's ended up working in the end, so I'm delighted. And like I say, we're going to be using some of that data to analyse some of your votes and see what you think. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, and I'll hand you over back to Richard.
Okay, so after what's happened in the last 24 hours, a bit of practice in voting is probably not a bad idea. Get ready for it, chaps. We have got some fabulous speakers this afternoon, and the last thing you want is for me to waffle on, so I'm going to get on with this pretty quickly. I will just say I'm Richard Thompson, Professor of Epidemiology and Public Health here in Newcastle, and my work has largely been around involvement of patients in decisions about their treatment and care, shared decision making, but Susan and colleagues have also drawn me into this incredibly important area as well. And so I'm delighted to be able to invite up to the floor some of our speakers this afternoon. And first of those, despite the best efforts of LNER to stop her getting here, is Dr. Tessa Richards. Many of you will know of Tessa. She's the senior editor at the BMJ, and most importantly, she's led the BMJ's Patient Partnership Initiative, which is really a leading approach amongst journals, and absolutely fascinating, and we'll hear more about that, I'm sure. She's a physician herself, and she's led various components of the BMJ journal over the years, and writes regularly in a range of settings, and equally importantly, I think she also lives with the long-term conditions and cares for people with long-term conditions. So I think Tessa's got a fabulous breadth of understanding of the issues, and it's a delight to introduce you, Tessa. Do please come up and join us.
Jolly good. Let's just stick it on so we... There we go. Yeah. Okay. Hi. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's absolutely great to be here, and I think it's so kind to be given the opportunity to talk to you. I'm just a little nervous of the dog here. I've got a feeling that, you know, you should never get on a platform with either dog or children, because they're for sure they're going to outclass you. Anyway, our strategy. One of the great things I think about that map that's just gone up was that big word collaboration, which seemed to come out on top. For me, in effect, that is exactly what our strategy is about. It's about turning a paternalistic journal, like all journals are, like all health systems are, in a way, on its head, and working with patients and the public, because at its heart, what we're doing in this strategy is trying to co-produce our content with patients. We're on a journey here, and I can't say that we've got there, but that's what's at its heart. And I'm very pleased to say that we're now spreading it across the company, and it's been picked up by other journals too. So not just our portfolio of journals, which amounts to about 70, but other journals too are beginning to think, yeah, maybe it will be a good idea to work with patients. So I find that really exciting. So why should we do that? Why should we collaborate? Well, it seems so blindingly obvious, doesn't it? It hardly needs to be said, but I don't think anybody says it much better than Jeremy Taylor, who's CEO of National Voices, which is an umbrella coalition of patient organizations and voluntary organizations. And for me, this sort of almost has the ring of truth of Thomas Jefferson's declaration, you know, we hold these truths to be self-evident. And I'm pleased to say that Jeremy, along with other people speaking here, like Simon Denegri, who's up next, are members of the BMJ's International Advisory Patient Panel, and they were the people who we enlisted their help 5 years ago and asked them what we should do to really change our thinking and become more effective, credible agents to advance patient partnership, not just in research, but across all aspects of healthcare. And the panel keep us up to the mark. We talk with them on an almost daily basis, and they inform what we do and never cease to stimulate us. I think the reason we need all this in healthcare is, again, it's very obvious. I'm sure there isn't a patient in the room. Certainly this is what I feel when I go to visit the hospital, who hasn't sort of experienced a system that seems to be designed around the needs of those who are working in it rather than those who are accessing it. And we know, and it's widely acknowledged, that health systems are costly, they're wasteful, they're inefficient, they're very inequitable, and they're riven with commercial and professional interests. And this is despite all the grand policy initiatives over the past 20 years, you know, saying we're going to promote patient partnership, we want to listen to patients, we want to provide person-centered care. Although it has to be said that a lot of the definitions of person-centered care have actually been dreamt up by the health professionals rather than the patients. And I think just one example of this perhaps is that there's been a whole listening to patients, terribly important. So what do we get? A massive, great industry of, you know, asking patients, what did you think of our service today? It's a bit like pushing a smiley face at the airport or a not so smiley face at the airport. And what's happened is that patient experience officers are sort of deluged with mountains of paperwork. It's not analysed, it's not collated, and it's not used to inform better care. So that's an example of a initiative that has have said, stuck in the laboratory. Well, is there a patient in this room who couldn't have told them that? And, you know, why is it that 20% of people who attend outpatients don't need to be there? Well, you know, it isn't the patients who are insisting that they turn up, it's the system. So, plenty of room for constructive collaboration, I feel. But it's not just, I think, collaboration, obviously, in how services are run and designed. All of this should be evident. Research should be at the forefront of policy making. And yet, here we have another huge problem, which didn't, interestingly, there was, on that mind map, there was, you know, relevance of research, but nobody had actually put down waste, as far as I could see, or if it was there, it wasn't one of the bigger bubbles. And I would have said that this is a major concern for all of us who work in healthcare, and not least for patients. And the people who've articulated the problem about waste in research most clearly, in my view, are Serene Chalmers at the top and Paul Glasziou just underneath. And when you read that level of waste, it's pretty gobsmacking, isn't it? Don't you think? And I mean, this represents not only a massive investment, but also if you think in terms if you're a patient on a clinical trial, that trial never gets published, or it should never have been done in the first place because it was duplicating work that had already been done, or that it was done and it was very badly analysed, badly conducted, flawed, and in all sorts of ways, got buried, never got published because of negative results. I mean, we know there's a whole gamut of reasons why there is waste in research, and there's been a lot of efforts, not least spurred by these two, to try to at least counter some of the problems. And I'm sure you've heard of the All Trials campaign and Trials Tracker, efforts to at least make sure that the research that is conducted sees the light of day and gets published in a timely way. But there's also new forums like ensuring value in the research and reduce research waste, and all sorts of initiatives going on. And the BMJ has been involved in the evidence based medicine manifesto for better healthcare, and I'm pleased to say that among the 9 sort of clauses within that which are advocating for change, foremost among those is to do research with patients, to get them to really influence the research agenda, because it's going to be a key factor in reducing research to address the questions that matter to patients and frontline clinicians, and also to ensure that then the results are published, accessible, can be used by the patient community and the people on the front line. So this is just a quick kind of breakdown of our strategy. Remind you, perhaps in a way, that we're not all about research. We also have a high education content, lots of platforms for debating and commenting on policy. But I'll stick now with research, as this is what the engine and the energy is in for this room. And this statement that we've asked for, we've been asking it for about 4 years now, and I'm pleased to say that more and more journals are taking this up. Just to say, were patients, carers and the public involved in your research? And as you know, funders are encouraging this, and you're debating it in detail here about methodologies, impact and everything else. But the other thing I think I just draw your attention to here is in the second, under research number 2, that we've also embedded patient review of research papers, not only research papers, I'll say, educational papers too, and debate papers, and we're embedded that. We've done it alongside the peer review, and it's been a wonderful and stimulating journey in its own right. So this is what we ask in the statement that now is in the guidance to authors. And when we accept a paper, it's essential to have an answer to these questions, even if it's the one at the bottom. No, we didn't involve them at all. And we're encouraging people to sort of say, well, why? And to think about this. Obviously, there'll be some studies where that may not be relevant. But I think this first one was the development of the research question developed with, patients and carers and aligned with their priorities. I think I've been very inspired by the work of the James Lind Alliance, and I was very pleased as a patient living with a long-term cancer to see that one of the most recent things that's come out was the JLA Priority Setting Partnership, where they looked at the research priorities for patients, and there are many of them who are surviving with cancer, so as a chronic disease, so it becomes a long-term thing, so that their priorities research are very different from the sort of priorities that a patient, when they first present with cancer, is going to present with. I think that the other thing which is crucial here is we ask them, were the outcome measures informed by patients, carers, public's priorities. This is so important, isn't it? You know, and I'm so pleased that there is now a head of steam to look at patient-reported outcome measures, to realise that value has to be defined in outcomes that matter to patients. Again, forgive me if I go back to the cancer example, but I think it's deeply worrying that there are so many drugs that are getting on the market, really expensive cancer drugs, on the basis of surrogate outcomes, that they just, halt progression-free survival for 3 months. And these trials say nothing about quality of life, and an awful lot of them show no effect on overall survival. Is that delivering value to health systems and patients? I think we have to be very worried about that. We also ask if they were involved in the design and conduct of the study and recruitment to it. As you know, pharma companies are pretty hot on this because they know they can save billions, quite literally, by involving patients in the design and recruitment to the study. It all makes it flow a bit more logically. But I mean, it's important at all levels, isn't it, as we know? Because the burden of research, too, is... we're just about to publish a rather lovely piece which says, well, I wanted to go on a clinical trial because I have this condition and I knew it would be likely to help me, but frankly, the effort of having to turn up, every week, 3 times a week, have endless blood cells, I couldn't do that and carry on working, and I made a decision, and the decision was that I wouldn't go on the trial, and I'd carry on working. So I think this question about the burden of intervention is important. And so too, of course, is involving them on plans to disseminate results. I mean, I think it's shocking that 50% of trials, there's a recent report from the Science Committee, I think they're saying that still not reported. Well, I mean, it seems to be absolutely unethical for the end users of research not to know the results of the study. And in the BMJ, from January onwards, we're going to absolutely insist that authors of the papers that we publish have got a plan in place to disseminate results to end users. I've told you about patient review. I won't say too much about it, except that we've had to obviously build up this big database in order to achieve that. And they, the patient reviewers do brilliant stuff. They have, illuminating reports. These reports really do help editors just as much make decisions about papers, just as much as the peer reviewers' reports do. And they pick up on different things too. And the great thing is now, and I hope some of you will have noticed, that all our research papers are open access, and the reviewers' comments, the patient reviewers' comments, are there, open access, online, next to the peer reviewers' comments. So, isn't that a great example of collaboration in action? Getting this PPI statement sounds, it sounds terribly straightforward. We ask these questions and they answer it. But I think the fact that some of the responses we get back from authors suggests they're still a little bit confused as to whether they're working on patients or with them, and what is. So we spend quite a lot of time and effort going through these statements and getting something that makes sense and that as it actually says they did what they said on the tin, if you see what I mean, because sometimes they say they involve patients and then it turns out that they didn't. So this is, again, it's a learning curve. It's work in progress, but I suppose that, if you like, is an example of a good one. And I'm just including this example of patient reviewers' comments simply because I like the feistiness of this. And if we, just that first thing is, this is pretty important to me because actually I don't get to select. So if there's a big variation in how hospitals treat my condition, that matters to me because I don't get a choice, and I'm probably going to just take them to the nearest hospital. And I'd hope to goodness that, it's going to be okay. And again, this is example about outcomes that matter to patients. I don't, whether I end up in a cath lab, that's one thing, but, I want to know about everything. Am I going to survive? Am I going to get out of the hospital? It's good. So as I say, we're thought-provoking comments like this from the patients are helping authors, I think, craft better papers and actually making them think, you know, if they didn't involve patients in their current study, perhaps it'd be a good plan to do it next time around when I do my next tranche of research. We've done a bit of evaluation, not as much as we would like, and in terms of what our peer reviewers and patient reviewers, the patient reviewers are very positive about collaborating and working with us in this way. And it's really nice that they want to be involved. And some have sort of said, well, it's a way to pay back. And actually, I'd like some training to do it better. And we've learnt to improve our processes by listening to what they say, because obviously they've had criticisms about, you know, for a start, you know, the journal's clunky processes. And I'm sure all of you could put your hand up and say, oh, my God, you know, do I have to read 55 pages of it before I submit a, you know, can't you kind of get your stuff a bit shorter and snappier? And I'm sure we can. The frequency of the reporting, I mean, this is interesting, because when we started, it was about, we did a baseline study, it was about 10%. And it's been going up slowly, but obviously it's going to get up more as more and more funders see this as the direction of travel. One of the things that is depressing, and I think for me, is this, where we did this big survey of how much clinical trial results were disseminated. And I think what was so particularly depressing about it is that there seemed to be no energy or money or time resorted to dissemination. It was like end users, well, you know, we want to get that piece published in a peer-reviewed journal, tick. Then we're off to the next place. And it seems like there's a real message here about how we handle that. And obviously we want to do more research. But I'm just going to end up here with the fact that here we are, a room full of you, full of enthusiasm, and as we are at the BMJ, and I feel that what we've learnt so far is that although there is this movement to cooperate, to collaborate, it's got such a long way to go. And that I think if we look at what's happening in less developed countries, there's still a huge democratic deficit. You know, people's voices are not being heard in terms of the agenda, their priorities. And I feel that, you know, at the Journal, and I know that we're at one with this with NIHR, that we need to strengthen, formally have some mechanism to strengthen patient and the public's role and their rights in research, because there's nowhere that really enshrines that they should have a right to sort of co-produce research. So we've set out that we thought that this is an important direction of travel in this editorial in July, which I hope you will look at if you haven't seen already. And just to set out that, you know, who will, all of you, will some of you join this sort of what we think, I don't know if it's a social movement, but we sort of envisage that maybe there is a place here for some sort of draft to think about a charter about enshrining this concept of co-production of research as a global norm. And we've got a kind of wish list of, you know, meetings we're going to hold and where we're heading. So just to say, do come and grab me, and if you're interested and enthusiastic to help and support with that, this enterprise, that would be absolutely great. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much. Tessa, thank you for kicking us off with such enthusiasm. Let's keep that enthusiasm going throughout. Right, we're now moving on to our open plenary session with examples, international examples of approaches to PPI and research. I will introduce people quickly in the interest of time. You've got the biographies in your pack. We're kicking off with Simon de Negri, who many of you will know. The only thing I would say about Simon, in addition to what's in the pack there, is it's interesting to know that he also enjoys writing poetry and playing the guitar. And I actually found a little bit of a poem of yours, Simon, that looks really perfect for today, that says, "The wizened chestnut tree could only cradle the evening wind in his candlestick arms for so long, for she had much to say and wanted to be free to speak of faraway places she had been, things she had seen." That sounded like a good kick-off to the discussion we're about to have. So thank you, Simon. And and sorry, you're a Crystal Palace fan as well, so we'll let you off that one. Yeah, away the lads.
go. Oh, my best singing voice. Well, look, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's absolutely delightful to be with you. Congratulations to the organisers, because I think they have managed to organise probably the public involvement conference of the year. And I'm sure that goes down to just good timing, because the question of measurement, evaluation, reporting, impact, whatever you want to call it, is very much on everybody's minds at the moment. But I think they put a cracking programme together, and some great sessions, and I think you're going to see some great work over the next 2 days. And I'm delighted to start off this second session, and thank you very much, Tessa, for your perspectives from the BMJ. So I wanted to begin really with two personal reflections on the debate about evaluation. So the first one is that when I think about this debate, the first thing that comes to mind is this knot. Perhaps we could call it the evaluation knot, because it does feel as though we're quite rapidly getting ourselves into a knot about the subject. And you know what happens when you pull one end of the knot? What happens? It gets ever tighter, doesn't it? Certainly doesn't loosen. And my perception is actually that there is a sense of one of those strands being pulled very hard. And I think it's being pulled quite hard by academia at the moment. I don't think there's anything wrong in that. I think that's fantastic. As someone who's spent a lifetime devoted to public involvement, you know, I'm really delighted that we actually are now getting the attention we deserve as a serious part of health research. But nonetheless, by pulling one end of the knot, I think we are in danger of getting ourselves into an ever tighter bundle from which we can't get out of. And I think the only way that we're going to really resolve this is if we do work collaboratively. So academia doesn't hold all the answers. The answers are shared, and they will come from different places in this room, as I'm sure you'll find over the course of the next 2 days. If you look up on Google how to get rid of a knot, it says find something sharp to leave it. And I would say we have that sharp object in the room in our public contributors. And my experience, I'm not from academia, my experience that in all the debates I'm present in, which involve public involvement, it's the common sense of public contributors, which usually gets us out of a very introverted, self-fulfilling prophecy, which isn't of help to anybody. So that's my first reflection, and it's a positive one. I do think we can get out of that knot. The second one is that there seems to be a little bit of an undercurrent in the coverage of public involvement in academia but elsewhere, that somehow we've created this huge monster which is a negative force. Everything that's been done in health research in the past, present, and in the future. And I think that's really interesting, because it's completely different from how I view the world. Monster in this, unless they're hidden in the panda costume, but I actually know who is in the panda costume, and I can tell you they're no monster. But seriously, when I go around the country, what I see and meet are not monsters, they're not zombies or unicorns. I see thousands of people who are working with us to make a difference. It might be very messy, it might not obey all the laws of evidence or the laws of research, but as a funder, as a national funder, spending public money, I'd rather much be working with that messy community than doing something different. So it's really important that we, through our language and our interpretation of what's going on, we don't knock a good thing. And I think that we do in this country, and increasingly in other countries, have a really good thing. The other thing is that whole image of somehow toppling health research into the water. And I'll tell you a very quick anecdote, which it reminds me of. When I lived in America many, many moons ago, I lived in one of those clapperboard houses that are very common in the Midwest, which when you live in them, you feel as though it's quite frail, particularly if you've been living in a brick mortar terraced house in England somewhere. Anyway, when I lived there, I had this really beautiful cabinet made, and the carpenter came round to deliver it, and he was putting it into my dining room. And I said rather anxiously, "That's not going to fall through the floor, is it? Because it's really, really heavy." And he said, "If it falls through the floor, you've got bigger things to worry about your house than you know." And I think that about this debate. Sometimes when people think about public involvement as something that's going to somehow topple health research, I think actually they're really are getting the wrong end of the stick, and I think they're getting the wrong end of the stick about what we're trying to do here. So, 2 personal reflections. You can take them or leave them. Let me turn now to NIHR's approach. So we don't have time today, and it's not the place to go through the history of public involvement in NIHR, other than to say we've been trying to do it from the beginning. We know we're not perfect. We're doing the best that we can with the funding we can and with the partners that we have. And I think we do a very good job, actually. What I would say is that for us, the whole why of public involvement is an academic question. For us, we've moved on from that point quite quickly. And I think we're quite clear about the rationale and the reasons why we're doing it and the objectives. And I suppose there are 2 broad ones. One is we feel it's the morally right thing to do as a public funder, that this is how we should be working with the public. And the second one is we think and believe it produces better research. And all the evidence we've collected, and again I would completely agree it's not perfect, points in that direction. And one of the things that we think that working with the public does is give us an opportunity to think more clearly about the future, what's needed in the future of research. So to give you just one example, which is very apparent in the minds of people here in the United Kingdom, I'm sure it is abroad, multimorbidities is a key issue for us. People with many complex different illnesses interacting. The way we've set up science in the past has no answers for that. But the people who are living that have many, many answers and a lived experience. They have real-world experience, if you like, if you want to use that term, every day of their lives that we're going to need. So we know as a funder we can't answer those problems just by turning to scientists. We have to incorporate the patient view, the carer view, the public view and patient experience. So for us, the why is an academic question, and hence my title. I would completely agree that in many senses, it's been a messy picture that we've done it. We've done it by the seat of our pants quite often. I don't think people quite understand that NIHR, being a distributed organisation, and grown very iteratively over the years, there hasn't been a master plan. Sometimes I reflect and think I wish there had been, and I wish we were able to evaluate from that from the very beginning, but we haven't been able to. We've had to take the opportunities as they've come along. And one of the difficulties, of course, is the environment around us is changing all the time too. So this is a slide I often put up in conferences. It's intended to be provocative. I've drawn a very deliberate, arbitrary line between that past, present, and future. But one of our challenges, I think, in all this room is to recognize the many changes that are happening through our society and trying to reflect that in the work, in the partnership, in the relationship that we have with the public. So, I suppose to sum up where we are in NIHR rather, we certainly don't believe that patient carers and the public are always right, but we think they always have a right to be at the table making decisions with us, and that's our philosophy now and going in the future. Against that background of change, though, we did try and recalibrate things 3 years ago with our Going the Extra Mile strategy. And you'll see there it sets out a vision of quite expansive vision of how we want to encourage wider public involvement across the nation. And we have 7 objectives, which are very, very briefly described there. There's much fuller statements of those. And at the bottom of that, you'll see things in the future, which I'll come back to, reach, relevance, and refinement. So we have been basing a lot of our work and thinking against that background, against this strategy, which we are currently, or rather the Cabinet Office is auditing at the moment. It's also true to say that we have, of course, collected lots of things over the last 12 years, And these are just some examples. It's not that we haven't done any measurement or evaluation or thinking about or reporting. So we're very good at collecting numbers. In the top left-hand corner, we can tell you how many people are engaged in any particular aspect. We can't really tell you about the quality of that work, but we can tell you that that number of people are engaged at that point. We're getting much better, I think, at our researchers reporting public involvement as part of posters and presentations, and there's some good stories coming out of that. Again, perhaps the depth and breadth isn't there. We're very good at giving you comparative data about processes. So this graph in the bottom right hand is a graph which shows you how many applications from different funders actually have some public involvement content in them. So we're quite good at demonstrating that our process is leading to more public involvement being staged in applications. We're quite good at doing patient stories, but they're a little bit promotional. We're quite good at asking people for school reports, their institution or their facility, and we sort of mark those, but we don't really look at them very closely. So I absolutely accept we do a lot of collective information, and one of our challenges is perhaps we haven't thought and considered how we do that in a more significant way. And I suppose that's one of our challenges going forward. And how are we coping with that challenge? How are we attacking that challenge? And in the interest of time, I'll go through this fairly rapidly. So I think one of the good things from our point of view in NIHR is that our work to think about evaluation and reporting is part of a much bigger piece of work than that NIHR is doing to think about its impact across all its activities. So that gives us life in the public involvement community in NIHR, and gives us political support and air cover to do a lot more work than we've previously done in the past. That's a really important thing to think about. So this, I'm not going to go through the whole of this slide, but the essence of this is that also NIHR, we're not just in the business of reporting through things through the academic journals. We have to obviously go to ministers and prove the case. We have many different stakeholders and partners who have a different perception and interpretation of what evaluation and impact looks like. And one of the things that we're moving towards then, therefore, in NIHR is what we're going to call a value framework, but which is very loosely based on the Wellcome Trust success framework that I think many people in the UK will have heard about, which is trying to think holistically about evaluation and reporting and monitoring from a funder's perspective, and I think quite a useful thing to look at if you have time after the meeting. So we're very much moving into this direction. How are we going to do it? What does it look like from a public involvement point of view? Sorry, that's some of the sort of visionary aspects of what we want, and one of those is to see all our workforce, all the people engaged with NIHR, thinking about impact as part of their day-to-day work, and I think that's very important because we don't think about it at the beginning of our work, we think about it too late. I chair a NIHR working party that's looking at the whole issue of impact, and sponsoring as part of that, everything from looking at the data we're collecting and how we're looking at how we're using that and whether we can do that better, whether we should even be collecting it in the first place, rather than putting unnecessary burdens on the system, thinking about the ways that we might create a community conversation such as this to help us think more about impact, etc., etc. So we have a lot of different activities that we're sponsoring to try and come at this question from different angles. But I suppose the two things I really wanted to concentrate on were the main building blocks, I think, for how we begin to address this in a more strategic, comprehensive and cohesive way. The first is our UK public involvement standards that we've done with our colleagues in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, which were published in March, and which are an attempt to give people useful guide to how to introduce and take forward public involvement in their own setting, whether it be a research team, whether it be an organisation, or even just as an individual. And we have 10 test beds, which are running at the moment, testing those up and down the UK, and we have 47 freestyle organisations that are doing their off their own back. So this is a really important exercise, and I know it's attracted some criticism, and I'll come to that in a minute, but we think we have something here that has a high degree of confidence behind it because of the way that we've done it. One of the things that we're going to do as part of this, very shortly, is do an exercise across all our public contributors, starting in the next couple of weeks, which is to ask them what impact they feel as though they've made, whether they feel valued, whether they've been fed back to, where they would like to see the improvement happen in our relationship and partnership with them. And some of you may have seen this article in the Journal for Medical Ethics, BMJ, which gives a critique of the standards. I'm very relaxed about this critique. I think it's great that someone is writing about this, it's getting this attention, but I think it probably doesn't quite understand the context and the provenance for the standards. I don't think it respects actually that in NIHR, as in a lot of public involvements, we've actually almost had to do this through street fighting. You know, the literal equivalent of going from laboratory to the laboratory, fighting our grounds, making gains, sometimes having to go back to the same place. You know, it is a struggle. It's not being developed in a perfect world. But the good thing about it is that it's been done through a very open public exercise, which has involved many contributors. I'm coming to the end, Richard. The second aspect is, second building block is thinking about thematically what impact looks like for us. So this was very roughly set out in the Going the Extra Mile strategy. And here I've given you very rough definitions of what we're going to begin to focus on the back of the standards in terms of thinking about demonstrating success. So reach, relevance, refinements and improvements, and relationships, and you'll see the definitions there. And I think we're going to be doing a lot of work to fill those out and to give our infrastructure, to give our research team some guidance on how to think about those and how to evaluate and report against them. So the standards, if you like, are process measures, and these are our moving towards our success measures. Very finally, I thought of 3 areas of discussion which I haven't really covered in a great deal of detail. One is, how do we create a greater evidence base? I think that's something we all need to think about as a community, but also from outside the community. How do we make that happen? It's often a question laid at funders, but it's not always easy for an NIHR funder to do that. There are other funding sources as well, which might be an opportunity. How do we create the right sort of stories which show that point of difference, that change that happened, enable us to learn from those? Christine Staley's talked about that this week in her blog. And how do we support people to try new things? So in our community, we've had a model that's been very developed around clinical trials, clinical research. You know, our big battle in NIHR is moving the research community to think more about social care, public health, places where methods and methodologies are less refined, less defined, been less developed, and how do we enable, how do we empower people to do more work in those areas? Because they're going to need a different approach than the ones we've taken in the past. And on that note, I'll finish. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Simon. We're going to move on to our second speaker in this session, who is Professor Antoine Boivin from Canada. He's the Canada Research Chair in Patient and Public Partnership. He's recently published a systematic review in PPI of research measures and scales. So, Antoine.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to share the stage with Simon and Christine, an esteemed colleague in the area have really acted as trailblazers in this field that I've learned a lot from. It's a lot of pleasure also to be back in the UK, where I started my research training on patient and public involvement research about a decade ago. Now I need to do the computer stuff here. That's me. This is it. So what I've been asked to do is to paint you a picture of the landscape of patient and public involvement in research in Canada. And as you will see, this is a very fragmented landscape. As some of you may know, in Canada, we do not have a single healthcare system. We have at least 14 different healthcare systems, healthcare being the responsibility of provinces and territories. That means practically that health services, which drugs are reimbursed, how physical physicians are remunerated, nurses' scope of practice, even legal criteria for medical aid in dying varies depending on which side of the country you live in. And that has very practical implication also when you think about patient and public engagement. So research funding for healthcare is the responsibility of the federal government, while healthcare delivery is done at the provincial level, which means that policies for patient and public involvement vary and are sometimes in contradiction with one another. An example being the policies for patients' reimbursements, which is allowed at the federal level for research, but not allowed when the same patients are engaged in healthcare institutions in provinces. How this works from the research side, so the equivalent of an IHR in Canada is the Canadian Institute of Health Research, or CIHR, which launched in 2011 its strategy for patient-oriented research, or SPORE. This was implemented starting in 2014, so it is a very short history compared to the 20-year plus history of patient and public engagement in research in the UK. So the role of the federal actor is mainly be to draw general definitions of patient engagement in research, general principles and incentives. So some targeted research competitions require researchers to engage patients, but the majority of research competitions it's still an optional element of research. At the provincial level, CIHR has funded the creation of what they call patient-oriented research support unit, which are responsible, among other things, to support patient engagement in research for research networks and research teams, which is similar to what exists in the UK. I just learned this morning the Clarks, or that's the sort of the similar structures. Support units provide advice to research teams. They help them with recruitments of patients and members of the public, as well as training of patients and researchers alike as to how to work together. At the research projects and network level is where the actual practices of engagement occur in disease-specific or population-specific area. That gives rise to very different expectations about why we should be evaluating patient and public engagement. So at the federal level, the main driver for evaluation is mainly about accountability and mostly financially, how public dollars are being used. What you get is a bit of pre-funding evaluation about the patient engagement strategy in those competitions where it's required. So you would have patients included in the peer review or patient engagement experts. But once the teams are funded, there's barely or no evaluation as to whether patients have actually been engaged or if the plan has been followed. You just ask researchers if they spent the money in an appropriate way. At the provincial level, there's a lot of interest for developmental or formative evaluation of patient and public engagement to improve practices over time and learn from success and failure. So there's a lot of interest for evaluation here, but very little capacity. So within the support unit, there is growing expertise about how to recruit, how to train, but people are a bit at loss about how to evaluate. And at the project and network level, what you see is mostly an interest for summative or sometimes instrumental evaluation with teams that are mostly interested to showcase success to get funding renewal in the future. And they don't want to hear if it doesn't work. So in the end, this gives us a rather divided research community 5 years down the road with, on the one hand, the advocates of patient and public engagement who claim that this is going to lead to more relevant research, better use of research and practice, improved health outcome. On the other hand, the atheists who fear that this is going to lead to biased research, who say that patients are not representatives or not competent, and that this is going to increase conflicts of interest. And in the middle, you have the agnostic asking for more research or evidence about the impact of patient and public engagement. Now, there's two follow-up questions to the growing call for evidence. The first one is, do we really have the resources to build rigorous evaluation in this area? Now, I've given you an example of 6 rather big research projects that I've been invited personally to join as co-investigator to lead the patient engagement piece. And these were all research projects that were patient-centered, and this was all about engagement from the beginning to the end, etc. So the overall research budget ranged from $300,000 to $63 million, so that's rather big. And when you look at the percentage of budget for patient and public engagement, it ranges between 0 to 3%. When you drill down to budget for evaluation, it's really close to 0%. So building evaluation from this is really difficult. The other follow-up question is, how much evidence is enough evidence to support patient and public engagement in research? So if you compare 2 systematic reviews that have been conducted recently about clinician engagement in research versus patient engagement in research, you realize that patient engagement has been a heavily researched area, especially in the past 10 or 15 years. When you oppose this to current policies in Canada to support clinician or patient engagement in research, on the one hand, for supporting research training of clinicians, we have funding streams and scholarships to help clinicians like myself do an MSc or a PhD or a research fellowship for up to 6 years. And you have a 3-day training curriculum for patients to learn about research with no scholarship. When you look then at the opportunity to evolve and develop with a research career as a clinician versus as a patient, you have funding programs for clinician scientists for up to 12 years to complement their salary, and no such programs for patients. And then the ability to be recognized within a research institution as a principal investigator and act as and hold grants and be able to sign for expenses, that's possible if you're a clinician with a master's degree, but it's not possible if you're a patient, you've been a patient for 45 years and you have the same master's degree. Which means that one of my patient partner who has an MSc degree, we're co-principal investigators on very large grants, but in the end, as far as the research institution is concerned, is my employee. So at the end, this leaves us with an overall picture where at the federal level, we've been telling researchers in the past couple of years that they shall engage patients and members of the public, with a push towards engagement practices, but no push towards engagement evaluation. And that results in engagement process becoming having a patient on the grant, engagement support becoming funding patient placement agencies across the country, and impact becoming either fear of failure for those who doubt or claims of success for those who believe. And this is creating overall a pushback against the policies for patient and public engagement, and this is really at this point threatening the sustainability of the strategy for patient-oriented research in Canada. Now, this is some of the work that we've been doing, the pieces together. 2 years ago, with my colleague and partner, Vincent Dumais, who's a very inspiring patient partner, we founded the Center of Excellence for Patient and Public Partnership, which includes a school, a lab, and a network. And our mission is to support both the practice and the science of patient and public partnership in health research, in health education, in healthcare, and in health policy. So we're trying to follow our own principles, and the team is co-led with patients. We currently have over 20 staffs on the payroll, almost half of which are patients who are co-leading projects, who are acting as recruiters, as trainers, and as evaluators. Our vision of what we do is the idea that health in a society is not produced by doctors and nurses alone, but is really co-produced by citizens, patients, working together with professionals. If you think about it, when a kid is sick, the first caregiver is the parent. And when a parent is sick, the first caregiver is oftentimes the child or a spouse or a neighbor or the patient himself. So this is the vision that we're pushing towards, and it's to realize that vision. We're supporting patient and public partnership in healthcare organization, research, education, and policy. So we've been working a lot, and Vincent is a busy guy. We've been supporting in healthcare organizations over 40 projects, including patients in governance, quality, co-design of services. In research, we've been supporting over 10 national research networks, 60 research projects. A lot of our work was grounded on supporting the engagement of patients in the education of healthcare professionals. So we currently have over 250 patients training over 4,500 healthcare professionals every year in the skills of collaboration, communication, and ethics, and as well as involving patients in policy making. And on the science side, we try to build on these activities to build evidence in science, and collectively as a team have published over 80 publications on this topic in the past couple of years. So working across these different areas of engagement allow us to learn across engagement domains. So this is an example of a trial that we conducted a couple of years ago on the impact of patient engagement on priority setting within healthcare institutions. Now, it's very hard to randomize research networks according to whether or not they prioritize research topics with or without patients, but you can do this with healthcare institutions, and that's what we did. And we found that there was a huge shift actually in priorities when patients are effectively engaged in priority setting, that they can influence CEOs and medical directors and professionals of an organization. This allows us, in turn, to generate new hypotheses about what could be the effective mechanism for patient engagement and priority setting in other areas, such as research, through process evaluation, trying to unpack the key ingredients for effective patient and public involvement, making sure that patients are not just engaged as a plant around the table, but can effectively change things and collective decision-making. This allows us also to generate hypothesis about how impact can move across level of engagement from macro to meso to micro level, and we've been inspired a lot by Christine on this front. Our focus is really on partnership methods. So we tried to move away from engagement where, for example, researchers decide when they want to engage patients, who they want to engage, for which reason, and they decide also when to disengage patients when they don't want to hear about them anymore. So we want to support partnerships, so mutual forms of engagement where patients and professionals share the leadership or co-building projects together and also are sharing responsibility both on the practice side and on the science side, which means also that as far as we're concerned, building evidence and knowledge is not just about academics. And so we're learning, we're recognizing the value of the experiential knowledge of patients and members of the public. And this is a competency framework that was actually developed by a patient who was working with our team, who did his PhD on the competences of patient trainers, and who identified competences that patients develop to become first partners in their own individual care, and then that some of those competences, communication, collaboration, negotiating with your professional, can be translated and mobilized when you're engaged in a research setting or as a trainer, etc. So we use that kind of framework when we recruit patient partners to identify those patients who have the competencies and skills to be effective on the team or on a group. This is what we try to do to bring people together across the country, and that's work that's been led by my colleague Audrey L'Espérance, who's going to be leading a session tomorrow. What we've been trying to do to increase capacity for evaluation and patient and public engagement is to build a national evaluation coalition of actors. And what we've been able to do is to bring people together from all provinces, including the patient engagement leads for the support units and the research networks for the patient-oriented research strategy, along with engagement scientists and collaborators in the healthcare sectors, and we're hoping to extend this to international collaborators. That coalition helped to build, or is trying, one of the things that we're trying to build now is a national adaptable evaluation framework with the big boxes of what things can be evaluated in different contexts. We've built a toolkit of existing evaluation instruments, and the goal of this is to increase overall capacity for evaluation of people. And our role as an organization, we don't claim expertise in this area. Our role is to gather people, facilitate, integrate findings, and share it. So that's an example of this systematic review that we've published last summer of the existing evaluation instrument for public engagement in research and health system decision making, and we've turned this into an open access, freely available evaluation toolkit to help people use existing tools rather than reinvent the wheel all the time. So one of the findings from this review is that we need to collaborate, including to do more international collaboration in this field. So there's lots of instruments and tools and work that has been done, but I don't know about what's been done in different areas and countries. So if you see, one of the striking findings is that only 11% of existing evaluation tools have been produced on the basis of a literature review of what had been previously developed. So we really need to work together a little more there. So in conclusion, limited evaluation currently is threatening the sustainability of engagement policies in Canada. We need to strengthen evaluation capacity across engagement domains, so not only in research, but also in policy, in education, and in healthcare. We believe that there's a lot to learn from these engagement domains where the same questions are being asked, and that building national and international evaluation coalitions could improve engagement science and practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antoine. We're going to have a very quick break to see if we can solve some of these problems with the sound before we move on to Chris.
now, is that about right? Just to give you a ballpark, about 500 studies, and we funded about $2.2 billion. And these next two slides are just to kind of give you a quick idea of what we funded. Remember I told you we had multi-stakeholders, so I often have a wheel that I show. So our stakeholders are patients, payers, policymakers, regulators,